We've all had moments where we walk away from a conversation feeling like we just got spun in circles. Maybe you shared something important and were met with criticism. Maybe your needs got minimized, or maybe you left questioning whether your feelings were even valid in the first place. This is what it feels like to deal with someone who leans into narcissism. Not always in the overt spotlight hogging way, but in the subtle manipulative moment where everything becomes about them and your reality starts to bend. But here's the truth. People who use narcissistic strategies don't hate vulnerability, they fear it deeply, because vulnerability requires giving up control. And for someone wrapped in the need to be right, admired, or above reproach, that's terrifying. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's not fragility. It's not about being soft or naive or emotionally reckless. Vulnerability is the courage to show up when there are no guarantees. It's the strength to say, this is how I feel, even when we don't know how it will be received. It's the ability to stay rooted in our own reality, even when someone is trying to rewrite it in front of us. And let's be honest, when you're in a relationship with someone who uses narcissistic tactics, your vulnerability often becomes the first thing to be used against you. You share a fear and they minimize it. You express a boundary and they push it. You seek understanding and they flip the conversation until you're the problem. Slowly, subtly, it starts to erode you. Not all at once, but like water on stone. You start to wonder if you're being too sensitive. You second guess your tone, your intentions, even your own memories. That erosion, that slow disconnection from yourself is exactly why we need to reclaim vulnerability as a form of power. Because the truth is, narcissists don't thrive on your weakness. They thrive on your disconnection. And when you stop trusting your instincts, when you doubt your feelings, when you shrink to keep the peace, that's when they gain control. But when you lean back into your vulnerability, not as a weapon, but as a compass, you begin to see clearly again. You begin to say, no, this matters to me. I feel this. I know what I experience, and that is powerful. Choosing vulnerability in the face of manipulation is not about being raw for the sake of it. It's about being rooted. It's about saying, you can try to twist the narrative, but I won't twist myself to fit it. That kind of strength doesn't shout. It doesn't fight for approval. It doesn't try to outmaneuver. It simply stands quietly, clearly, and it says, I am allowed to exist here as I am. And if that threatens you, I won't shrink to make you more comfortable. That's the beginning of freedom. Is once you stop seeking validation from someone who is invested in withholding it, you begin to reclaim something much more valuable, your own voice, your own truth. So as we talk about how to expose a narcissist, subtly, wisely, gently, we have to start here. I'm with you. With your courage to feel, with your ability to say, I matter, with your decision to be seen even when someone tries to make you invisible. If we're going to have an honest conversation about narcissism, we need to do something that's rarely done. We need to bring both clarity and compassion into the same room. Because narcissism is one of those words that gets tossed around a lot. It's become shorthand for selfishness, arrogance, or self-obsession. And while those traits might show up in a narcissist behavior, they don't tell the full story, not even close. At its core, narcissism isn't really about confidence. It's about deep, often unacknowledged insecurity. It's the belief, usually buried under layers of bravado or charm, that I am not enough. I will never be enough. And if people see who I really am, they'll leave. So instead of risking vulnerability, instead of being open to feedback or connection, a narcissist builds a false self, a mask, one that says, I'm special, I'm superior, I'm the exception, and they spend an enormous amount of energy keeping that mask in place. But here's the hard truth: masks make connection impossible. When you're in a relationship with someone who leans into narcissistic behavior, whether that's a partner, a parent, a boss, or a friend, you often feel like you're in a relationship with a performance. It can be charming, persuasive, even intoxicating at first. But over time, it becomes exhausting because you're not relating to the real person anymore. You're relating to a persona designed to protect them from shame. Which this doesn't excuse the harm, but it does help explain it. Narcissists tend to react to others' vulnerability as a threat. Why? Because your openness, your honesty, your willingness to admit fear or fault, it reminds them of the very parts of themselves they've spent their whole lives denying. Your vulnerability shines a light on their shame. And they will often do whatever it takes to turn that light away from themselves and onto you. That's why conversations can feel so disorienting. You bring up a concern and suddenly you're defending yourself. You try to set a boundary and it becomes about your tone. You ask for emotional intimacy and they accuse you of being needy or dramatic. Here's where clarity matters. This behavior is not about you. It's about control. It's about emotional self-preservation at your expense. And here's where compassion matters. Most narcissists didn't choose this pattern from a place of malice. Many developed it in response to their own early experiences of neglect, abandonment, or emotional invalidation. In other words, narcissism is often a defense mechanism that started in childhood and calcified into identity. But let's be clear, understanding why someone acts this way does not mean you have to tolerate it. Compassion is not compliance. Empathy doesn't mean you abandon your own emotional safety. In fact, true compassion includes you too. It says, I can hold space for your pain without letting it crush mine. It says, I can understand your wounds, but I will still protect my boundaries. It says, you are responsible for your healing, and I'm responsible for mine. So when we talk about exposing a narcissist, we're not talking about vengeance or humiliation. We're not talking about punishing someone for being emotionally wounded. We're talking about bringing truth to the surface, truth about the dynamic, truth about what's really happening in the relationship, and truth about what you need to be emotionally safe. That's what this conversation is about. Because if we don't understand narcissism clearly and compassionately, we run the risk of either demonizing people who need healing or losing ourselves trying to fix someone who doesn't want to change. Clarity lets us see the pattern. Compassion reminds us of the humanity inside the pattern. And boundaries, they're what keep us safe while we navigate both. There's a quiet kind of wisdom in asking the right question at the right moment. Not the kind of question that's meant to trap or corner, but the kind that opens a door, that lets truth walk into the room without force. In a world that often confuses volume with power, questions are revolutionary. They don't push, they invite. They don't accuse, they explore. They don't demand, they reveal. And when you're dealing with someone who operates from a narcissistic mindset, questions become one of your most powerful tools. Why? Because narcissists are wired to control the narrative. They want to steer the conversation, dictate the mood, define the roles. They want to be the one who knows and explains and interprets. But when you ask a clear, grounded question, especially one that reflects back their behavior without attacking, it creates a moment of disruption, a pause, a gap in the performance. It says, I'm not playing the role you've written for me. I'm thinking for myself. And I'm not here to fight you, but I'm also not here to lose myself in you. Think about it like this. Arguments and confrontations often escalate power struggles. If you call someone out directly, especially someone used to deflecting and defending, they'll likely armor up. You'll be accused of being too sensitive, too emotional, too difficult. But the question, a well-placed, emotionally intelligent question doesn't ignite ego in the same way. It invites reflection, even if the person avoids answering it. And that avoidance, that is the answer. See, questions do something powerful. They put the responsibility back where it belongs. They say, I'm not going to tell you who you are. I'm going to ask you to show me. That alone often disrupts the dynamic. Because narcissists don't want to be seen. They want to be admired, they want to be right, they want to be above reproach. But they don't want to be seen, especially not with clarity. So when you ask a question that cuts through performance, that gently but firmly invites authenticity, they have a choice to make. Step into truth or reinforce the mask. And here's the most liberating part. Your job isn't to make them choose truth. Your job is to ask from a place of grounded self-awareness, a place that says, I'm rooted in what I know, and I don't need to convince you of anything. I just need to see how you respond. That response gives you information. It tells you whether this person is capable of emotional accountability. It tells you whether they want to engage in connection or control. It tells you whether there's room in this relationship for mutual respect or just more manipulation. And that's the subtle power of the right question. It doesn't need to raise its voice. It doesn't need to prove a point. It simply asks and lets the truth arrive however it may. That's what we're building toward. A moment of quiet disruption, a moment where the mask slips, not because you ripped it off, but because you created space too honest for it to stay on. And when that moment comes, everything begins to shift, not because they change, but because you do. We've talked about vulnerability as strength, about how reclaiming your voice, your feelings, and your truth is the beginning of freedom. We've explored narcissism with both clarity and compassion, understanding that it's not about confidence, but control. Not about strength, but fear of exposure. And we've looked at how asking thoughtful, grounded questions can interrupt a manipulative dynamic more effectively than confrontation ever could. And now let's talk about the question. It's simple, almost deceptively so. But like most powerful things in life, its strength lies in its honesty and precision. What do you need from me right now? Honesty or approval? Pause with that for a moment. Let it settle in. What do you need from me right now? Honesty or approval? This question is not sarcastic. It's not a trap. It's not designed to humiliate or expose someone in a way that leaves them defenseless. It's a mirror. It gently reflects the emotional contract that is playing out in real time. Am I here to tell you the truth, even if it's uncomfortable, or am I here to maintain your ego, even if it costs me my integrity? You're not saying you're being manipulative. You're not saying this is all about you. You're simply asking for clarity about the role you're being asked to play in that moment. And that's what makes it so disarming, so revealing, so quietly revolutionary. Because when you ask this question, you're not escalating, you're not criticizing, you're not even accusing. You're inviting, you're offering the other person a chance to step out of the game, to show up as themselves, to choose truth over control. But here's the thing, many narcissists won't take that invitation. They'll feel the ground shift beneath them and they'll scramble to regain footing. They might respond with confusion, irritation, or defensiveness. They may say, "Why would you ask that? What's that supposed to mean? Are you trying to psychoanalyze me now?" "Wow, you really think you're better than me, huh?" And those responses, they tell you everything. As a person who is open to real connection might pause. They might ask, "What do you mean?" Or even admit, "Honestly, I think I need approval right now." But someone who's operating from a narcissistic frame, someone more committed to being right than being real, will twist the question. They'll turn it back on you. They'll make you feel wrong for even asking it. Because in that moment, the point is not whether they answer honesty or approval. The point is how they respond to the invitation to be real. This question isn't just a tool, it's a flashlight. It shines into the dark corners of the relationship where roles have become distorted and truth has been made to feel like betrayal. It says, "I'm no longer performing to keep the peace. I'm no longer afraid of clarity. I'm willing to be honest, even if it makes you uncomfortable." And maybe most importantly, it says, "I trust myself enough to ask for emotional truth and to walk away if I don't get it." That's not cruelty, that's courage. And remember, asking this question is not about demanding perfection from another person. It's about seeing whether they have the capacity or the willingness to meet you in a space of honesty. Because real intimacy, real friendship, real leadership, it's not built on approval. It's built on truth. So if you've found yourself lost in someone else's narrative, if you've felt like you're constantly editing yourself to avoid conflict, if you've been praised for staying quiet and punished for speaking up, this question is your invitation back to yourself. What do you need from me right now? Honesty or approval? It's one question, but it can shift everything. What do you need from me right now? Honesty or approval? You didn't raise your voice. You didn't accuse. You didn't try to win. You just asked, and in that moment, everything shifts. Here's what you need to know. Narcissists, especially those who are deeply invested in controlling emotional narratives, don't fear conflict. They fear exposure. They fear being truly seen in a moment when their defenses are down. And that's why this question is so potent. It cuts through the surface and gently touches something much deeper. The fragility they've spent years denying. So let's talk about what you can expect, because the reaction to this question is never really about you. It's a reflection of them, of how safe they feel with truth, of how much distance they've created between who they really are and who they want the world to believe they are. There are typically a few ways a narcissist may respond. One, the deflect and deny response. This is the most common. You'll ask the question, and instead of sitting with it, they'll deflect. They might say, "What kind of question is that? Why are you trying to confuse me? Are you trying to sound deep or something?" This reaction tells you that they're not actually willing to engage in emotional self-awareness, not because the question is mean, but because it requires them to slow down and reflect. And that's dangerous for someone who survives through emotional momentum. They may try to shift the conversation, accuse you of trying to be manipulative, or throw in a quick insult or sarcastic remark to regain control. Don't take the bait. Their reaction is the answer. 2, the ego armor response. Some narcissists respond with false confidence. They'll puff up. You might hear, "I don't need either, I'm fine." That's such a stupid question. I don't need your honesty or your approval. Seriously? You think you're some kind of therapist now? This isn't strength. This is fear in a mask of superiority. When someone refuses to engage with a question that asks for emotional transparency, it tells you they're not willing to be real with you, not even for a moment. And the harder they lean into arrogance, the more vulnerable they actually are beneath it. Again, let them respond how they need to, but take the message seriously. 3, the confused or stalled response. This one is subtle, but revealing. You'll ask the question, and they might actually pause, stare, look thrown off. Maybe they ask, "What do you mean?" "I don't know." "And why are you asking that?" This is often the moment where you'll see the first crack in the armor. This person may not have been asked an emotionally intelligent question before, especially not from someone they've trained to be emotionally compliant. This pause isn't always bad. Sometimes it's a sign that part of them wants to step out of the performance. But if they followed that confusion with manipulation or blame, the moment was just a glitch in the control pattern, not a sign of actual willingness to change. 4, the gaslight then attack response. Here's where it can get painful. Some narcissists will go on the offensive, not because they're strong, but because they're terrified of being unmasked. They might say, "You're always trying to twist things. This is why nobody likes talking to you. Why do you always make things so dramatic?" What they're doing here is projecting their own discomfort onto you. Your question, calm, respectful, honest, triggered their shame. Instead of sitting with that shame, they're trying to put it back in your hands. This is classic gaslighting. And it's meant to make you question yourself so they don't have to question themselves. When this happens, breathe. Feel your feet on the floor. Remember, you are not wrong for asking a respectful question. They are simply revealing that the relationship is not emotionally safe. 5, the rare but real honest engagement. Once in a while, very rarely, a person who leans narcissistic will pause, soften, and respond with something surprising. "I guess I needed approval. I don't know why." That's a hard question. "Can we talk about it?" This isn't typical, but it's possible. And when it happens, what you're seeing is not just the narcissist being good for once. You're seeing the human beneath the armor peek through. That moment matters, but only if it's followed by change, not just emotion. Because vulnerability without responsibility is just performance. True transformation begins with awareness, but it requires action. So what's the point of all this? I think the purpose of this question isn't to make them crack. It's to reveal where they stand. It's to remind you of what's real. And it's to help you decide without drama or distortion what kind of relationship this truly is. It's a mirror for them, but more importantly, it's a compass for you. Because once someone shows you their discomfort with honesty, you stop wasting your time trying to build connection in a space that only rewards performance. You stop shrinking, you stop appeasing, you stop explaining yourself to someone who's not actually listening. We've walked through the hard, honest terrain of what it means to stand in truth especially when you're up against a dynamic designed to keep you small. We've explored the strength of vulnerability, the complexity of narcissism, the quiet power of asking one honest question. We've looked at the ways that question disrupts the performance, reveals emotional safety or the lack of it, and invites us to reclaim something sacred, our self-trust. But let me be clear, this isn't about diagnosing people or seeking revenge through clever language. It's not about trying to expose someone else just to feel powerful. It's about returning to yourself. Because for so many of us, especially those who've spent years navigating emotionally unsafe spaces, truth has always come at a cost. We've been taught to dim our light to keep others from feeling uncomfortable. We've learned that silence earns us survival, that people stay when we stay agreeable, that the less we need, the more we're loved. But at some point, that survival strategy starts to feel like suffocation. At some point, you realize peace bought with self-abandonment isn't peace. It's a quiet war against your own soul. Language, and that's what this question represents. What do you need from me right now? Honesty or approval? It's more than a tool. It's more than a tactic. It's a line in the sand, a moment where you stop negotiating your worth. And yes, it may change your relationships. Some will fade, others will fracture, but the ones that remain, the ones built on real mutuality, will deepen in a way performance never could. The truth is, you cannot control whether someone else chooses growth, empathy, or accountability, but you can choose it for yourself. And that is where your freedom lives. So I'll leave you with this. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are not here to be approved of by everyone. You are here to be whole. And wholeness begins with choosing truth, your truth, over comfort. It begins when you stop asking, how do I keep the peace, and start asking, what does peace look like when I'm no longer abandoning myself to find it? You are allowed to ask questions that make people uncomfortable. You are allowed to take up emotional space. You are allowed to walk away from what confuses your nervous system but calls itself love. And you are absolutely allowed to build a life that feels like coming home, starting with one powerful, soul-honoring question. Thank you.